I'm Big Al Weekley, and today we're going to talk with John Steele. John is one of the original members of the rock group The Animals. I'm sure all of you remember the song The House of the Rising Sun. The Animals were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994. So John and I are going to talk today about the music career of a legendary group, The Animals. John, it's great to have you with us.
My pleasure, Big Al. I'm really pleased to be with you.
I appreciate you taking the time so we can kind of look over some of the history of the Animals, and I think the best place to begin, we usually start at the beginning, but you guys are still out touring full-time, and you're on a tour right now, right, John?
Not so much a tour, just a constant round of work, you know. I mean, it's not the original Animals, you understand. I mean, Eric Burden has been living over there in the States for about 40 years now, and so I'm with my band, who we call Animals and Friends, and we play all the Animals repertoire, and it's still good fun, a lot of fun.
And if people want to find John or a bio about the members of the Animals, that were formed around 1962, 1963, the website is theanimalswebsite.com. So, John, how did you all get together? How did you begin your group over in England?
Well, that goes back to the mid-50s, actually, when Eric Burden and me first met in 1956. We were first-year students at a Newcastle College of Art. We headed off right away in our first-year class, and Eric was already, wanting to get involved in music, and we formed a band. We called ourselves the Pagans. And that was the foundation of what eventually became the Animals. A couple of years after that, we met Alan Price at a gig, and really impressed us. A really two-fisted keyboard player. He was with another band on the show, and he sat in with us, and we immediately poached him and said, "You must come with us." I mean, so he joined us, and over the next year or two, we added on Chas Chandler on bass and Hilton Valentine on guitar, and by 1963, that became the Animals.
You guys kind of got into a little bit wilder rock than most of the rock bands in England, didn't you? I mean, that's why they called you the Animals. Was it because you were wild, or is there another reason why? Where did you get the name?
The Wild Animals thing, I mean, it was true enough. I mean, we were pretty, we did let it rip on stage, no question about that. We weren't a kind of cabaret act by any means. We were pretty wild, it's true. But the name, the Animals, the story was a kind of PR thing by the record company. They sort of said we were called Wild Animals by the fans, but it's not true. By the time we had the final lineup was together, we'd gone through several different name changes, and at that point, it was called Alan Price Rhythm and Blues Combo, which, as you'll agree, that's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
So just about the point where we were getting interest, people were coming up to check us out. We were working in Newcastle, which is about 300 miles north of London, and everything was happening in London by that time in 1963. The Beatles had already kind of knocked the door down for all the British bands who were to follow. And suddenly people started to come from London to check us out because the word got round that we were a hot band, you see. And a brilliant musician called Graham Bond, who he played with us at our club where we were resident. His band was Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, and Dick Hexel-Smith on tenor. And Graham Bond played Hammond organ and alto sax, and he was a brilliant rhythm and blues player. And he loved the band and sat in with us. And it was Graham who suggested to our manager, he said, "You want to get rid of that name, that Alan Price Rhythm and Blues Combo is just too clumsy. You know, think of the Beatles, think of the Rolling Stones. These are the up and coming young guys." And he suggested the name The Animals. that suited us fine. It suited us all fine, except for Alan Price, who didn't like. Didn't like losing the name, you know.
You know, John.
It worked well for us.
It sure did. And it made it a lot easier for you guys to be wild on the stage, being called the Animals.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It was a ticket to play havoc.
You all have had some unusual things happen. I read up on in your life, and we'll talk about that. Once again, we're talking with John Steele. He is the original member of the Animals, played drums. John, I guess I want to ask your opinion on something, because Bruce Springsteen had discussed the influence that the Animals had on rock and roll, and he called it a revelation. Kind of give me an idea of the difference between the Animals and the other British rock groups coming up at that time.
I don't know. It was very generous of Bruce Springsteen. I mean, it was very, he was touring the world with a new album a year or two back, and everywhere he went, he's told everybody that the Animals was his first real inspiration. Not like others, like the Beatles or whatever. And so when I first heard "We Got to Get Out of This Place" and "It's My Life," and he said that inspired him to go for a career in music, which was very nice of the man. It was very nice to know that we influenced him, because I've got a great admiration for Bruce Springsteen. He's a really seriously good, solid musician and great writer. But he said every song he ever wrote was based on "We Got to Get Out of This Place," misunderstood, and "It's My Life," which is very nice, and nice to know we've been had that kind of impact on people.
Well, when the Animals were just beginning and you were in England and performing, I would assume that there would probably be a big positive thought about, look, we got to get to the United States if we really want to go ahead and blow this out. So how long was it before you came to the United States, and what was it like when you came over here for the first time?
Oh, it was wonderful. It seemed like everything happened so fast. By the end of 1963, we're ready to leave Newcastle and try out luck in the big city. We all headed to London. So from the very beginning of 1964, we suddenly created a lot of interest, and a guy turned up at one of our gigs, and he was Mickey Most. Mm-hmm. Who became one of the most successful independent record producers of that time in England. And also with him was an agent called Peter Grant, who eventually became the manager of Led Zeppelin. So these are really two heavyweights,
Wow.
And within weeks even of arriving in London, Mickey Most was arranging us to have a record deal. And Peter Grant, who was at that point, he was working for an agency called Don Arden, the Don Arden Agency. Don is known as the godfather of rock at the point. But Peter and Mickey together signed us up for a record deal and an agency deal. Don was at that point bringing over Chuck to the UK for the very first time in Europe. And he was setting up a major tour, and he said, "I want you guys to be on that show. I'm signing you up as your agent, and you're going to be touring with Chuck Berry and Carl Perkins on the same bill." And that was magic. And we did that tour, and while we were doing that tour, we tried out a new number. It was our second single, and it was called "House of the Rising Sun." And we hadn't recorded it yet, but on that tour we could tell that we had found something special, because the audience reaction was so positive that we got Mickey to arrange a session for us in the middle of this tour. This was in May of '64, and we went in the studio in between a show in Liverpool and a show in Southampton. In the middle of the night, we just went into a studio, one-track studio. I've got a letter I wrote to my girlfriend at the time, and I said, we recorded that Rising Sun number, and we did it in one take. So we had a one-track studio. So all we did was we just set up to get a sound balance, and we played it. And Mickey said, "Come listen to this. I think we've got something here." And we tripped into the into the control room, and we listened to the playback, and he said, that's a hit record. And the engineer on the desk said, "Oh, that's a bit of a problem." He said, "Like what?" He says, "Well, it's 4.5 minutes long." And, the industry sort of was 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes was the maximum single in those days. That was, because of the old 78 RPM records. They couldn't get more than that on a record, And Dickie, he just stopped for a beat, and he said, "The hell with that." He says, "We're in the vinyl age now. Let's go with it." So it was released, and it was the first single that was, longer than 3 minutes.
Well,
and, next thing you know, Al, it was number one, and that's gave us our ticket to America.
John, I've got to let's kind of dissect the House of the Rising Sun, since you brought it up, and I'm glad you did. There's a couple things I would like to talk about that song. Number one, Where did you all come up with that song? And I know somebody had said that it was actually a lot of the guitar riffs that got everybody's attention, and of course the howling vocals on that song. But where did the House of the Rising Sun come from?
Well, it's a very old folk song, and there's supposed to be several versions of it going back way back into the 20s and things. But we first heard it, my memory, the time I ever heard it was on the very first Bob Dylan album. It was an acoustic album, and he played that song, and we all bought that album. There was something special about it. We could tell at the time that this guy was something special, and that song was the standout track as far as we were concerned, and it was a folk song,
Yeah.
But somehow we were attracted to it, and as I say, we started to develop it to play on the Chuck Berry tour.
Right.
It was Chaz's idea. Chaz, the original bass player, who eventually became the manager and producer of Jimi Hendrix. And Chaz had that kind of business head where he said, you've got Chuck Berry, you've got Carl Perkins, and you've got the other bands. It was like a package tour. Says everybody's going to be trying to out-rock Chuck Berry. I think we should try something that's going to stand out a bit different, And he was bang on right. We played House of the Rising Sun, and it did the trick. And curiously enough, we picked up on Bob Dylan's later albums, his next album or two. And when we went to New York for the first time in the summer of '64, we arranged to meet up with him, and he took us on a kind of pub crawl, going around all the gigs in Greenwich Village that he had played up until he suddenly made the big time. And he told us this story. He said he had been driving along in his car listening to the radio, and he heard this version of How's the Rising Sun, which was ours. And he stopped the car, and it was like, whoa. He said it made him do a complete sort of change of direction from being acoustic folk to electric folk rock. So, it's fantastic what an influence that was to sort of suddenly make Bob Dylan change direction.
Yeah.
So it was really a fluky thing. We didn't think of it at the time that we're doing anything important. We just wanted to do a version of the song. It just happens to be that's the way we did it. And here we go making Bob Dylan have another think about things.
Well, I'm looking at a picture of you boys at the time back in 1964, and I guess you probably wouldn't have thought, like a lot of people do, that now you're legends, you're members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994, just because of that one decision to work on a little old acoustic song, but yet you gave it a complete different sound. It's just amazing the talents that are around the world. Tell us about the first time you were on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh man, it was the whole of the first visits to the States was fantastic for us. You got to remember when we were kind of teenagers in the 1950s, Europe generally was still trying to recover from World War II, and things kind of were dark, and America, when we saw movies and we heard the music and books, everything about that influenced us in our young lives seemed to come from America, And in those days, we were just sort of ordinary working class kids from an industrial town in the north of England. And in those days, the only people who could afford to go to America were film stars and big businessmen, and suddenly when the Beatles kind of opened the world out, that's when people like us suddenly found ourselves traveling to the States, and it was like, wow, this is the promised land. This is where we all the music and every movie and everything that was a sort of influence on us as teenagers came from here, and here we are, And then we come on the Ed Sullivan Show. I think was it something like 25 million regular viewers he had in those days?
Yes.
Massive exposure, So it was hugely important. I think we did the Sullivan Show about 5 times, if I remember rightly. And it was a strange kind of show because you only got a little slot, and some people got cut down for whatever reason. It was a very arbitrary kind of arrangement they had. I can remember there were strange things that there were. Of course, there were bands, there were singers. But were kind of, I remember distinctly there was a roller skating actor, and you get jugglers and all kinds of weird stuff going on. It was truly a variety show, and but it was astonishing for us to find ourselves, like I say, coming from our background, to suddenly find ourselves performing for the biggest TV exposure in the United States. It was fantastic. It was a really great feeling.
We're talking with John Steele, original member of the Animals. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994. John played drums, still out touring. Some of them are retired, but John is still out working hard. He's in England as we talk to him here on MusicChartsMagazine.com. Now, John, there's something, and I've looked back through the history of rock and roll and different people, but there's something that kind of show the wildness of you young men when you were young in 1964. You guys, when y'all come to the John F. Kennedy International Airport, did you all form a motorcade and each one of you ride in a convertible?
Oh, yeah, that was wild. That, I mean, like I say, America was like some kind of another planet to us in those days. And yet here we were when we first arrived. It got the publicity people from the MGM, the record company. They had linked up with an English motor car. It was a new sports car called the Tiger, the Triumph Tiger.
Yeah.
And so the publicity people had a great idea, animals, we've got tigers. so what they did was they had 5 Triumph Tigers, which were 2-seater open-top sports cars, and they put us one in each with a driver, so we were sat up on the back, like the back of the seat, with a guy driving, and each of us had a absolutely stunning, beautiful model dressed, a girl dressed in Basque fishnet stockings with a tiger's tail and whiskers, and they put us on the back seat with this with these beautiful models, and they drove us into Manhattan with a motorcycle escort, and it was just amazing to think, well, here we are arriving in New York City, and what a way to arrive,
Yeah.
to see that skyline coming up in front of us, driving into the city like that was just a terrific. I'll never forget that. It was a great moment.
I bet. I don't know how you could absorb all that. I'm sure remember some of it, but back in those days, radio and television were king, and especially being in New York City, I would assume there were thousands of people there to greet you, wasn't there?
Yeah, at the airport and outside the hotel, it was a riot. It was it used to get quite scary sometimes, because the fans are so excitable, and sometimes in their excitement they could almost do you harm,
Yeah.
It was all a kind of magic roller coaster at the time. We loved it. We were young and were stupid, so we just enjoyed ourselves, you know.
Well, you certainly have changed rock and roll with the style, and y'all didn't even know what you were doing at the time, and that's the Talents, the House of the Rising Sun, of course, in the top 500. Let's mention a couple of the other songs here. I've got a list of them. Don't Bring Me Down, Don't Let Me Be Understood, It's My Life. And then, of course, Bruce Springsteen mentioned the song We Got to Get Out of This Place. Kind of elaborate a little bit on some of your music and how you chose some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, We Got to Get Out of This Place was probably the next most successful track we recorded. It was kind of, Mickey had gone to the Brill Building in New York, the famous where all the writers worked, and he brought a few things back for us to listen for ideas, and that song just jumped out at us, and it was such a strong, dark kind of song, you know, very what I call grown-up music, you know.
Yeah.
It was. I think that was true of most of our stuff. You know, there was a kind of dark edge to it. It was all about real, you know, about life and the kind of. Some people had, you know, it was kind of a rough record, you know. And when we recorded that, we didn't realize at the time, but it became an anthem of a song, you know. Even now, today, wherever you go, people sing "We Got to Get Out of This Place" for all sorts of reasons. It became a very big thing in the Vietnam days when you know the troops. Over there, the guys over there would listen to that on the forces radio. Apparently, it was number one for some time in the Vietnam forces, you know, the Vietnam radio, and it was number one for some time. But you can imagine, you know, being stuck out there with a song like "We Got to Get Out of This Place," and even now, kids breaking up from school or, you know, doing whatever. It's still sung all over the world. It's just one of those songs. It would have been number one in the UK. It would have been our next number one, I think. Except that we were held off. We were held off by Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds.
Really?
At the number one spot, and we got to number two, and we were just waiting for them to slip down because it was a great song. That, you know, another Bob Dylan song, of course, and the Byrds did a great version of it, and they were number one, and we were waiting for them to slip off the one spot so we could move up. And what do you know? The Beatles released "Help" and went straight into number one over our heads.
Wow!
So we stayed at number two, but it was, you know, it's a great song, and you know, it's my life. Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. Bring It On Home to Me. They all stand up today after all these years.
Yes, sir, they sure do. We're talking with John Steele, the original drummer, one of the founding members of the Animals. You can check out their website. That's theanimalswebsite.com. They became members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994. Now, both of the songs, John, we just mentioned, The House of the Rising Sun, that ranked number 123 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs, and then your 1965 hit, We Got to Get Out of This Place, was ranked number 233 on the same list, and that list is songs, the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll, and what an honor to get a chance to talk with you. Now, John, there's an unusual thing that happened to the Animals. You were on a tour. You've toured all over the world, and at least what I can tell, you had some trouble over in Japan. You kind of had to get out of there, flee for your life, didn't you?
That was a kind of a later story. That's a story that Eric likes to tell about when he went over there. The original Animals played Japan in 1965.
Okay.
And it went good. It was great. We had a really good time there. But when the original Animals broke up a year or so later, Eric formed an outfit called Eric Burden and the New Animals. And Eric tells a story about when he went back to Japan. and had some run-ins with some very, very serious gangsters, basically, where he had to get out of the country fast. And I think I'll leave it to Eric to tell his story about that, because I can't remember the details of it, but I know he did have some problems.
Well, I tell you, I've got just a couple more questions for you, and we're gonna let you go. And
Okay.
I guess a couple things in your mind. What is the greatest thing that you yourself? Let me rephrase that. What is the greatest time that you can think of being with the animals that just exploded in your mind, that will stay in your mind forever? A great memory with the animals.
Well, I've always said, well, one of the things that still sticks in my mind was that we were just talking about that trip from the airport down to Manhattan in those sports cars with a 6-foot model dressed as a tiger. But from then on, it was just touring in America for us was such a blast. You know, we had so much fun. It was great. It was good because everything seemed to be for a first time for everything. You know, we were staying, meeting people that were idols to us. You know, and we saw some of the magnificent country. We all love America, and it was just such a blast to be there for the first time. That everything about it was fun, and that still stands out to me as one of the best times of my life. You know.
Well, John, I'll tell you, it has been such a great pleasure to get a chance to talk with you. To all your fans out there, and I know there's still yet a lot of people, a lot of new fans that have come on to the animals and the House of the Rising Sun, which will forever be in the Hall of Fame. What would you have to say to them if you get a chance to tell everybody here as we're talking together?
Well, I would just say, enjoy your life. If you can enjoy your life as much as I've enjoyed mine, you'll be lucky people. And whatever you want to do your best. Do your best, and whatever it is you do, just do your best and get the most out of it you can. And good luck with everything. Oh man, Big Al, it's been such a pleasure, and I think we've covered all the most important points. It's. I can't think of anything else to say. You've done your research really well, and it's been such a pleasure to be interviewed by you. I'm really, really pleased.